Hello, this is Domenico Composto with the third part of a video using quantitative questions for production possibilities curve, and we've linked it to competitive supply. This is part of a couple of or a few playlists within the channel. One is the introduction of the circuit flow and the PPC and applications of paper 3 with PPC. There's another playlist that will be linked in the video notes below for supply and demand, and also another one dedicated towards paper 3 quantitative questions. So let's take a look. So in the last video, the last two videos, we've tackled questions A, B, and C. And the result of question C is this model here, the competitive supply diagram, and how that relates to the PPC model in terms of reallocating resources away from barley towards wheat as a result of an increase in the price of wheat, leading to a reduction in the supply of barley. So that's a nice little connection between two models, the application of the PPC model and how it relates to the competitive supply model. In this video, we're going to practice supply and demand together, and that's in question D. So let's take a look at question D. It says, using a supply and demand diagram, explain the role of the price mechanism in the reallocation of resources as a result of a shortage in the global market for barley. Okay, so I got to show supply and demand and a shortage being generated in the market for barley as a result of a reduction in supply from S2 to S3. What's going to happen to price here, and how are resources going to be reallocated here? So this will be an extension of competitive supply. I'm going to leave out wheat and just focused on barley. I'm going to ask you to pause the video and draw a supply and demand diagram and illustrate a decrease in supply and illustrate what happens to price, what happens to quantity, and what is the role of the price mechanism, and how would you would analyze that or explain that for an assessment. Please try drawing that, thinking about price mechanism, how you would analyze that model, and then we'll go over it in just a moment. So please pause the video now. Okay, so let's go over your work. So for this question, I'm going to take out this model. All right, so the price of wheat is going up, leads to a decrease in the supply curve of barley. And I want to illustrate what's going to happen to price of barley and what role is price going to have on the allocation of resources and so forth. Okay, so let's just get rid of this and then start drawing that model. Almost there. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw this. So I need an X and Y axis. The y-axis I can label as measuring price, and we can also see it as measuring costs of production since we're focusing on that supply curve. The x-axis measuring quantity. So I'm going to have an initial supply curve, upward sloping. Label that S1 equals to the marginal cost of production. Then I'll have a demand curve, downward sloping. Label D1 equal to the marginal benefit. And then I'll have the initial price set, P1, and the initial quantity set, Q1. Okay, so we have P1, Q1, point A. Okay, that's the first thing you draw. Then there is a shortage in the global market for barley. So connecting from question C, the increase in the global price of wheat causes a reduction in the supply of barley. So I'm going to have the supply curve of barley decrease as a result of that non-price determinant of competitive supply, going from S1 to S2 equal to MC2. In the short run, we're going to hold price constant at P1. So at a price of P1, the quantity supply, firms will produce barley along their supply curve up to P1. That takes us to the sequence of going from Q1 to Q2. And so at point B, I'm going to make some notes here. The quantity supply is at Q2 while the quantity of demand is at Q1. So households or firms that are demanding barley as an input to produce bread and so forth are going along their demand curve all the way to point A at that price of P1, while firms along their new supply curve are only supplying up to point B. So we see that there's a disequilibrium, quantity of demand greater than the quantity of supply. You can also connect this to marginal cost and marginal benefit. At point A, marginal cost was equal to marginal benefit. But then since the supply curve has shifted in out of that equilibrium, and the easiest way to find allocative efficiency is by looking at the quantity of supply. How many resources are we allocating towards firms? And that's set by the supply curve. So I'm going to go along my Q2 curve upward, and you can see that at Q2, the marginal benefit is now greater than the marginal cost. So I'm going to make a note at Q2, the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost, which means that there is an under allocation of resources, land, labor, and capital, under allocation of resources towards the production of barley, towards production of barley versus what is desired by society, versus what is desired by society. Society wants a quantity of output at Q1. That's where the quantity of demand is, but we're only producing up to Q2. So there's an under allocation, and then we also see that we have excess demand. Quantity of demand is greater than quantity of supply, which is a shortage. Okay, quantity of demand. So what is that going to do? The price mechanism begins to take effect. Price will begin to rise. And it's going to rise to a new equilibrium. So we're going to draw that where S2 equals D1. So let's use our ruler and show this new price and this new quantity of output. So price will rise from P1 to P2, and that's going to alter the quantity, supply, and demand until we get to point C, this new long-run equilibrium. So here I've drawn the model. Using a supply diagram, which I've drawn, I have to explain this. So I'm going to analyze this as I would for the exam, step by step, taking into consideration the price mechanism and the reallocation of resources and so forth. As can be seen in this graph, I'll label this, let's say, graph B, because it was a previous graph, or graph C, because I drew competitive supply before. So let's label this graph C, market for barley. On the y-axis, we're measuring price and costs of production. On the x-axis, we're measuring the quantity of output. We have one downward sloping demand curve labeled D1 equal to the marginal benefit. It's downward sloping according to the law of demand. And we have two upward sloping supply curves labeled S1 and S2 equal to our marginal costs of production, equal to the upward sloping according to the law of supply, where S1 equals D1 at point A. That sets a competitive market equilibrium price at P1 and a competitive market equilibrium quantity at Q1, where at Q1, the quantity supply equals the quantity demanded. Also, we can see at Q1, the marginal cost equals the marginal benefit, so it's allocatively efficient. Due to an increase in the price of wheat, as stated in question C, farmers will allocate more resources towards wheat production, which we can see in the PPC model, PPC1, where they're going to increase wheat production from 50 million metric tons to 76 million metric tons, and that will cause them to reallocate resources away from barley production, decreasing barley production by 24 million metric tons, going from 40 million to 60 million. That decrease in barley production is illustrated by a decrease in the supply curve. That's a non-price determinant, competitive supply, how wheat and barley both compete for land and capital and labor resources. So supply shifts in from S1 to S2. And we're going to hold price constant in the short run at P1. And at a price of P1, the quantity of supply will follow the supply curve up to point B, while the quantity of demand at P1 follows the demand curve all the way to Q1. So we see there's a disequilibrium there. At a price of P1, at a quantity of Q1, the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supply at Q2, which is excess demand. There's a shortage. We can also notice that at Q2, whereas the quantity supply at Q2, where there's the quantity supply, the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. So there's an underallocation of resources towards barley production versus what is desired by society. So the price mechanism takes effect. Price begins to rise as a result of that shortage from P1 to P2, and that's going to cause the quantity of supply to increase along the S2 curve. Farmers will begin to allocate more resources towards barley production and increase production from point B to C, or from Q2 to Q3. On the other hand, households will reduce, or firms that employ barley as part of their production will reduce their quantity of demand from point A to C, or from Q1 to Q3, until at a price of P2, we can see the supply curve is equal to the demand curve. We can also see that the marginal cost is equal to the marginal benefit, and quantity supply is equal to quantity demanded. We're at a new long-run equilibrium price of P2 and new long-run equilibrium quantity of Q3. And that's it. I will have an outline of that analysis below in the video notes. If you have any questions, feel free to comment those questions. And don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much. Hello, this is Domenico with Easynomics, and I just wanted to tie in one real-world application of competitive supply from the question that we were working on. There were 2 or 3 videos that are working together where we were tackling this question and applying some quantitative skills, some math skills, and also applying some models. So we can see the links between production possibilities curve and competitive supply and how that relates to shortages and the price mechanism and so forth. So in question C, we illustrated competitive supply where there was an increase in the global price of wheat, which would incentivize farmers, in this case, the Russian Federation, to increase their wheat output from 50 million metric tons to 76. They're going to allocate resources away from barley, and that's going to lead to a decrease in the supply of barley. So we see that decrease in supply here in that last model that we drew for question D. Supply is decreasing from S1 to S2, and that causes price to rise for barley. So competitive supply helps us understand that, yes, wheat price can go up, and then it can also cause the barley price to go up due to the decrease in supply, and we can see that in the real world. Here we see wheat price over a 10-year period, and this was the impact of the Russian-Ukrainian war, since both Russia and Ukraine are significant exporters of wheat, and that war conflict leading to a supply shock and also sanctions on Russia leading to a supply shock of wheat, and the dramatic rise in the price of wheat that we see here going from $769 per metric ton, I guess. That's the unit. I'm not sure if that's a unit. And it rising up to 1,151 or so, and then eventually it collapses. So that increase in price of wheat will lead to an increase in the quantity supply of wheat along that supply curve, and that will cause farmers to allocate resources away from barley production and other things that they can produce on the land that can be easily used in place of wheat. So if there is an increase in the quantity supply of wheat and farmers are reallocating resources away from, let's say, barley, we should see a decrease in the supply curve of barley and also an increase in the price of barley. And is that true? Well, let's look. It seems that it is true. Here we're looking at sorghum, barley, and oats. And in that same period, we see barley, sorghum, and oat prices also rising, going down, but staying high. So competitive supply as a model is very relevant, right? And it does help us understand the world. And again, there'll be a link to this model where we used wheat versus sorghum and how the Russian-Ukrainian war led to a supply shock in the global market for wheat. Supply shifts in from S1 to S2. It drives the price up. For individual wheat farmers, perhaps around the world, they see that price rising. And in the perfect competition model, that's going to be an increase in the quantity supply. And they're going to allocate resources away from soybeans or sorghum or oats or barley. Supply shifts in. And that also leads to a rise in the price that we see here. So there'll be a link to that video. But competitive supply is very useful for understanding commodity markets, agricultural commodity markets, where a farmer can produce wheat or barley interchangeably and how they gravitate towards a higher price and they reallocate resources away from the type of commodity that has the lower price and how that also leads to an increase in price of that. So very, very useful model that we see here. And that's it. If you have any questions, don't forget to comment those questions below and don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much.